Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today we have a real quick one for you concerning what is the best wireless controller for the Mega SG or for your Sega Genesis in general. We've been playing the Mega SG quite a bit lately, and holy crap, it is an amazeballs system for sure. But I constantly am getting comments concerning controller choice as far as wireless goes. What have I been using? What do I prefer? What is my feel on these things? So that's what we're going to quickly talk about today, guys. So what we have up against each other is three controllers: the Crix Joy ZZ Joys, however you want to say it, the 8BitDo M30 2.4 gigahertz, and then the 8BitDo M30 Bluetooth. We have used these, we have reviewed these, unboxed them already, but now that I have all three of them and I have finally been able to use them on the Mega SG, I do have my thoughts and opinions on this, and we finally do have some scientific numbers to back up the claims. Because if you remember, if you watched it anyway, I was doing a live review of one of these controllers, and then I started comparing it to each other, and I was like, holy crap, this Crix controller really feels like I'm wired in, and I'm not really having any bad input lag. You know, the response rate was really great and the controller feels really good. And comparing that to the 2.4 gigahertz, the 2.4 gigahertz M30 from 8BitDo was pretty close to this, but it was slightly more noticeable that the lag on the Crix was better. Not a crazy amount, but better for sure. Now, this controller was not without its issues, though. We had some problems with it: dropping connection, interference, ghost inputs, a lot of weird things. And since then, that has been resolved. So all the newer shipments of this controller, the 2.4 gigahertz, from what I've been told, do have a new firmware on them. But if you do have an older version, like I do, the first shipment, there is an update for the firmware on this controller that's accessible through their website. I had the beta firmware, got around to using it, fixed my issues, but like I said, the later ones that have been shipping should be good and you don't have to worry about that. But that firmware is available, and it's kind of wonky because you do have to take this apart, and it does use like a little tiny bit to get in there. All the information's on their website. Doesn't take too long, but you can update yours to stop those issues from occurring. Some people didn't have them, some people did. And then we had the Bluetooth version right here. And this one, my God, I could really feel the lag compared to these. But before we get into those numbers, let me give you the price rundown. The Crix, this guy, he comes with his own receiver. He's going to be about $65 or so. 6 face buttons. You do have your mode button. Really feels great. Very comparable to an original 6-button Sega Genesis controller. I don't have too many criticisms. The only main thing is I don't like the way the shiny plastic looks, but that's kind of nitpicky. But I do love the feel and how this responds. This is my favorite thus far, and we'll get into why with those numbers in a second. Now, comparing this to these, as far as the feel goes, these do feel comfortable in the hands like crazy. They are amazing. The design behind these, they do have an L and R button that mimics the Z and C, but if you use them through USB or on another device, they are remappable. They're not connected to that button. They are remappable to other things if you need. Fully rechargeable, has a very long battery life. This one has like 150 hours battery life. It's just nuts. But you really shouldn't have to recharge these over and over and over again. The versatility of this controller with the Mega SG, you do have access to just hitting one button to get into the menu screen, so that is good. You can like not use the hotkey, which I think is like down and start. You can just use the menu button on the controller, so that's great that that's incorporated. These buttons feel great. The X, Y, and Z on both of these do have a little bit of a wobble, not crazily so, not distracting. A lot of people say, hey, that's just how it is on a lot of controllers, but I don't really notice it on the Crix as much. It does have a little bit, but they're not shaky like these ones are, but slightly. But this does feel amazing in the hands, slightly smaller than this controller, and it responds very well. The Bluetooth, same thing, form factor, it's identical to that. The feel, I mean, you can't change your opinion. They both feel exactly the same. They work just the same, other than this wirelessly, the response rate, the lag is quite a bit higher than these guys. It is the more versatile of the controllers in that you can use this for a lot of other things. The 2.4 was $25 with its own receiver, by the way. Very cheap. The M30 Bluetooth is a $30 controller. Does not come with its own retro receiver. You have to buy this separately. So this is $20, $50 total if you want to use this on your Sega Genesis or your Mega SG. But this controller can be used across many different platforms, so on and so forth. You have a ton of options. Use this on other retro receivers. Use this on any Bluetooth device. It works great. I've used it on Steam, all those kind of things. It works just fine. But the numbers we have behind these things to support, my number one choice is the Crix. It just feels amazing. The response is great. The input lag is not that bad. Then the 2.4 gigahertz is pretty close. And then the Bluetooth, for me personally, I would just stay away from the Bluetooth. I have no real reason to use this controller. It's going to be between those two. So $50 for me, not really money well spent on my end, because after having these, this is to the wayside. No more. We don't need that bad boy. But the numbers. So what we have to support these claims is an article posted by Todd Gill from Todd's Nerd Cave. I'll put a link in the description for this and a link to his channel, because dude is pretty awesome with all the information he shares out there. But he did post an article on Retro RGB where him and a member of Smoke Monster's Discord, and I'll also link to Smoke Monster's channel. Awesome dude. If you're into FPGA-based gaming, check him out. But this user by the name of Enforcer, him and Todd Gill, they wound up doing some work together to get some scientific testing done to figure out what the input lag was on these guys, and what the lag-free claims were and all that stuff. And no, they're not lag-free, right? So they did get some averages here as far as the response. So first up, the Crix had 3 milliseconds, the 2.4 gigahertz 3.6, and then the Bluetooth 21 milliseconds. So this was sampled over a 20-minute period, a total of 100 times, and then averaged. So there you go. The Joys versus M30 2.4 and Bluetooth input latency lag results. Their methodology was using an oscilloscope. Enforcer measured with one trigger probe connected to the left D-pad direction on the controller PCB, and the other was connected to the left signal direction inside a Genesis. Time was measured on the oscilloscope, I can't speak today, from the moment the D-pad was activated till the time the left direction was measured in the Genesis controller port. The measurement of time is the input latency or lag. A wired controller would have a latency of 0. The method completely eliminates display lag, game code lag, and even human input inconsistencies. So I would say this is a very definitive approach here, right? There are a couple things to note from the testing. Enforcer found that the Joy's pad was more consistent in input latency than either the 8-bit DOS. While it averaged right at 3 milliseconds, it swung as low as 2.81 and on a few occasions as high as 5.49. Basically, the Joys will stay very consistent. That's a good thing. The M30 2.4 gigahertz was a little less consistent, with an average of 3.6 milliseconds, a low of 1.95, and a high of 6 milliseconds. So that is pretty interesting. That kind of swung, in several directions there, but still pretty good, I would say. The Bluetooth version of the M30 is a completely different story. While it averaged 21 milliseconds, it swung as low as 5.9 and as high as 38. That is flipping nuts. So from my assessment when using these live, it was very apparent that Bluetooth, I was having some crazy input lag compared to the other two controllers. So he states if you use the controller with something like a Raspberry Pi desktop computer or something else with Bluetooth, these results may not be valid. This doesn't hold necessarily true to those, so keep that in mind. So he states, conclusion, stick with either the Joys or the 2.4 M30 for your Sega Genesis consoles. unless you absolutely need a Bluetooth controller that can sync with all sorts of devices. So there you go. That's pretty much what I am stating as well, but I did want to back it up with their information. Check out Todd's Nerd Cave, Smoke Monster, all that stuff. Links will be in the description. Check out Retro RGB. But there you go. My feelings using these controllers pretty much spot on with that article. Love the Cricks, but it is $65. But I think if you're really into Sega Genesis and you want a solid ass wireless controller, it is worth the price of entry. But if you don't want to go that high, definitely the 8-bit though M30 2.4 gigahertz is right up there with it, in my opinion. The difference is fairly negligible in my eyes. Comparing the two, it's going to be hard to say for sure, but I did notice a slight difference myself, but maybe at that initial time, it was because my controller had issues. Now that I'm using it, it feels great. So definitely not going to go wrong with that 2.4. The Bluetooth, in my personal opinion, I am going to stay away from this thing because I have no use for it. Unless you're going to be using this across multiple devices, then I would recommend it. For $30, if you don't need it for a Sega Genesis, it's worthy of using on your PC, your Switch, that kind of thing. If you want to use it for your Sega Genesis and you're going to pay the extra $20 to get a retro receiver, sure, that's nice because the compatibility with the retro receiver, you can use other controllers as well. But you're at $50 already. If you're going to solely use that for your Mega SG or your Sega Genesis, why not just go with the Cricks for a few bucks more? Well, $10 to $15 more, right? And have a solid ass feeling controller. So that's pretty much it, guys. Just want to give you guys my thoughts and opinions on this. Boom, number 1, number 2, number 3, boo-boo, the foo, get out of here. I'm done with that guy. But really do appreciate it. With that said, guys, I will catch y'all next time. Peace out, bye-byes, and boom!